Welcome to Below the Line, where we talk about working in Hollywood from the crew perspective. My name is Skid. I'm a former assistant director and your host.
Quiet on the set.
Today we're talking about Him, the sports horror film starring Tyriq Withers and Marlon Wayans that is currently playing in theaters. It's directed by Justin Tipping, produced by Jordan Peele, and our guest today is film editor Taylor Mason. Taylor, welcome to Below the Line.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Glad to have you here. Joining me in the co-host chair this week is Christopher Angel, longtime Hollywood editor and regular guest of the podcast. Chris, glad you could join us today.
Very nice to be here. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Me as well. Warning for listeners, today's conversation will contain spoilers. But to kick us off, Taylor, let's start out talking about your background and how you got involved with this production.
So I've been in this industry for about 13 years now, which is very fast, 13 years. In my mind. I started off broadcast journalism class. We had to cut our own news packages, and it was the only part of this class and the actual degree that I enjoyed was was the editing. It's where I learned editing was a craft that you could earn a living from and tell stories. And yeah, I fell in love from there, took as many film classes as possible, and then decided that still wasn't enough and I went to AFI to just learn all things film. And there is actually where I met the director, Justin Tipping. We went around the same time. He was a year ahead of me. Since that moment, yeah, we kind of established a rapport and mutual respect for one another's work. And in the past, I don't know, decade or so, continued to work together and collaborate, mostly side projects. And we did that while I was assisting on some features, really, some kind of behemoth sized sci-fis where I got to just watch how the sausage was made at such a large scale.
Taylor, take me back to AFI for 1 second. Just for people who might not know, what does that mean and what is the program at AFI and what did you study there directly?
AFI, American Film Institute, is a conservatory where they take 6 disciplines and through like basically a deep curriculum in practical filmmaking. So we're doing nothing but making films like one after the other after the other. And there's some film theory and discussion, and there's maybe a paper or two in there, but for the most part, it's all practical application. And it feels like a 2-year boot camp, to be honest. They do not play around. You're learning everything under the sun, auditing other classes, really getting to collaborate with the other disciplines in a way that is pretty accurate to what I'm experiencing now outside of school. So yeah, it was a great education where I was able to kind of establish and build a really cool community of friends that I work with to this day.
And I assume you were focused on editing back then. That was one of the
Yeah,
disciplines, and that you were just editing a lot of films.
just editing, yeah, nonstop. I loved it. Then right after school, I jumped into, I think we were ready to assist kind of right after graduation. I jumped into this, I want to say it was for Fuel TV. It was UFC and Hooters content really that I was assisting on. So really just anything I could get my hands on, I was cutting. And then that created an opportunity to assist in some smaller indie features. I also touched some short form stuff, like especially commercial stuff in DC, like Nat Geo, things on Capitol Hill, like just really one-off projects. But I got a little taste and flavor of every kind of format until I came back to LA and got back into film.
Taylor, you went past it pretty quick. When you talk about a couple of sci-fi epics, you're talking about you an assistant editor on Dune
Yeah.
and Blade Runner 2049. Like, so these are, yes, indeed, huge, massive sci-fi epics. How did you get involved in that? And talk about what you learned in this larger context where you said, got to see how the sausage was made.
Talk about another boot camp. That was an amazing education. I actually got that opportunity through a colleague from AFI. AFI is the gift that keeps on giving, honestly. Her name was Mary Lukashevich. She was the first on Dune and brought me on as the second assist. Actually, she brought me on first to Blade Runner 2049. And then that's where, I got acclimated, met the team. There was like a workflow established. Everyone had their role. We took that over to Dune as well. And I think, I mean, the most valuable thing was just the collaboration, getting to see how that looked, how seamless it was, how people kind of contributed to the creative, like everybody, all hands on deck. We were fortunate in that we were included in a lot of solutions that they were looking for in story. We got to do a lot of maybe shooting in the room sometimes when we're looking for, I don't know, VFX elements or something like that. Like we got to do a little bit of everything to really get things done quick and dirty and to create proof of concepts. And so I don't know, I got a crash course in what it really means to use your team as a resource. And yeah, but most of the stuff you need is in your cutting room and or down the hall to make something great. And yeah, and also just to see what it looks like at such a large scale, like to see this big machine move. And really, it's just about dotting your I's and crossing your T's and communicating, like really any project. The stakes are just a little bit higher.
So then from being in the editing room as an assistant editor in these huge, huge sci-fi epics, studio movies, where did you go from there?
From there, I got an opportunity from yet another AFI colleague named
I'm
Denise
seeing a
Davis.
theme.
Exactly.
Yes. Sorry, who was it again? It was
Her name's Denise Davis. She was Issa Rae's producer for a very long time and has since gone out on her own, is producing her own stuff. And she got me in the room with some producers on the show called 20s. It's a half-hour comedy for BET. And ironically, that is the first credited show as an editor, but also my first real project with Justin Tipping, the director of him. So we all, we kind of like it was one big happy family, kind of grew together and just try to continue to work together. And that's where me and Justin kind of established this kind of collaborative experience and workflow and really got an idea of our taste for film and story and all of that. And I think that's part of what sowed the seeds to our collaboration on him.
Now, with him, this is your first studio feature. And so now these lessons you've learned in these other edit rooms, talk to us about how you organized your process and how it worked on this film particularly.
I really tried to mirror, the best of each of my experiences. I think, I've worked for a number of editors and they all set up their cutting room differently and utilize their team in different ways. And I tried to just find, different recipes that worked for me. And it was really just having a easygoing, like open door policy, all hands on deck kind of mentality that I think it made for one of like the best kind of support systems, the best creative collaboration. There's so many ideas that come from people just kind of walking down the hall and being like, oh my God, that's cool. This made me think of this the other day. And it's just making sure that everyone is inspired and feels like they can contribute. And yeah, and also spending some downtime with the team and making sure you're going to lunch with everyone and socializing. You become friends, so it feels comfortable and collaborative. And yeah, I think you're making the most out of the resources you have, which are the people that you're with. And that, I mean, as far as personally and I don't know, interactive setup, that's what the cutting room was like.
and a studio feature means that it was financed by one of our large vertically integrated studios. Like in this case, it was Universal. But can you talk to us a little bit about how a studio feature as an editor might be different than an independent feature, which I guess typically would be a smaller budget, but is financed independently, and then you get distribution. But what did it mean differently for you as an editor?
I mean, the stakes were just higher. There were more voices to pay attention to and to consider when dealing with the creative, like kind of translating the note behind their note for a director or anyone on my team in order to accomplish these things for like really all parties. And yeah, I mean, I think that's you. I kind of end up doing that on every project, but this was just more. There were just more voices. And it was great because we had more voices to also lean on. We had this objective perspective, kind of a guiding hand through the process. Obviously, it means what they do. They do it with their eyes closed. They, can see potential issues way before we do sometimes. And it's an asset. Like, yeah, very thankful to have them as a resource, to have their feedback, and especially because they have other myriad of other projects to have learned from and can impart some of what they know and their experience into ours. So yeah, I mean, I think I definitely flexed that muscle a little bit or got to at least strengthen that muscle of collaborating with the studio and also creative heads at Monkeypaw as well. So, I learned how to juggle and I'm better for it.
To get really specific for people to sort of paint the picture, when you would have a cut that you needed to show people, you felt like it was ready. What was that process like? Like who was in the room? How many people were giving you notes? Did that change over time? Who's giving feedback and how do they all work together? And how do you keep it straight?
It varies because there's a couple different iterations. And of course, the film's in a different state every single time. And so sometimes, like, when you're just kind of starting off, there might be a Zoom meeting with execs and with Monkey Paw, and we're all kind of talking about prioritizing and where we need to spend the most energy in the cut. And then the director and I will kind of go off and execute and really try to create his vision, create his cuts, and incorporate notes from both Monkey Paw and the studio. And then as things are finessing and we're honing and we're getting closer to that vision, we'll start kind of testing with general public. And they'll give us scores that we and notes, and their feedback sometimes is absolutely hilarious and very helpful.
Hilarious and helpful. Great, good,
Yeah.
good.
I mean, there's some funny. I wish I could pull one out of the air. I know I've written some of them down just because they're fantastic. But anyway, so we would, yeah, incorporate a lot of their notes, really try to get an understanding of what the audience is asking for, if there's any confusion, if they need clarity, things like that. And then do another pass with just another pass incorporating and changing and trying to satisfy the note behind the note a lot of times. And then that's when Universal will lay eyes on it and give us feedback on what we need to change or what they think will work best narratively. And then it just keeps going from there. And it's like, yeah, sometimes it's Zoom, sometimes it's paper notes, sometimes someone will come in and watch it. It's like, whoever's available and has capacity, but very fluid. And yeah, it felt pretty easy.
And what's the relationship of like, let's say your first cut to the script? I know that Justin is credited as one of the screenwriters, but did you feel because of that, or did you feel like you had to really try to stick to the script for the first pass and then move off, or what was that relationship like?
I try to stick to the script as much as possible just so Justin can really see everything he's done or like what the intention was to begin with, knowing that it's going to change usually drastically. It always does. But I really just want him to see what the bones are and everything that he's written and spent time, creating, what that looks like on screen. There are times where I'm like, well, I don't think we might not need this line. I'll text him and be like, do you mind getting rid of it or watching it without it? And he'll usually be like, yeah, let's go for it. But for the most part, I really want to like kind of lay out all the pieces so they're in front of us and we can really like have a really good perspective on what we need to prioritize and what we can lose or what we need to amplify so that we're not missing anything and nothing slips through the cracks. And then from there, we definitely start chopping.
I'd like to get a sense of how you applied genre and tone. This movie combined these horror elements and this football social commentary. I'm curious, do you sit down and develop some sort of Bible about how you're going to express these ideas in the edit room, or do the scenes have to speak to you and then you're sort of cultivating thought out of it? And either way, I can imagine, but I'm curious how it worked for you guys on this one.
It was a little bit of both. Like we talked concept before things were shot, but I think, things just change. They change at every stage. And depending on what you're shot, you're inspired to do something completely different and unplanned than what was scripted. And so we ended up really kind of adjusting and curating tone as we went. We knew we're starting with sports and horror and well, specifically football, where it's it's built into the sport, the genre, and it's like it's brutal on its face, and so we're trying to figure out how much of the actual subject matter are we going to let speak for itself versus how much are we going to influence or manipulate or amplify was kind of an ongoing discussion throughout the process. And it changed depending on kind of creative inspiration that would come in. And it was a very kind of open brainstorm room. Like we're just throw ideas out and try something new that might end up changing the trajectory of the story. So yeah, it was ever kind of shifting and evolving and finding itself.
And then to sort of start getting into some of the real specifics of the edit. Another thing I think that contributed to the tone and was interesting to see were the music choices and the music sequences. Were you given the music and said like use these pieces and you had to then cut montages to them, or were you also trying to choose music and suggest it for the production?
Both, actually. I think before we shot, Jess and I talked about the music kind of being something that we imagine one of the players listening to on their way to game day. And so I try not to temp with too much music, just because I think it influences my internal rhythm a little too much. So I try to let see how far the actual footage will go emotionally. And then but there's certain things like there's some montages that you can't, obviously show without music. And so I'll end up temping with a lot of our high school favorite hip hop songs from early 2000s, knowing that they would be replaced at some point. And then as soon as production wrapped, Bobby Krillick, our composer, gave us a palette of different kind of different moods that I could play with throughout and temp with until we got a cut, first cut over to him. And so, yeah, I mean, I definitely had enough in the assembly to convey, whatever emotion or information that we were going for initially. And gives Justin a really good sense of where he could take the footage that he just shot, knowing that, yeah, my decisions will be replaced at some point.
And then so when a song was finalized, let's say I don't think it was probably from the composer, but maybe like a sort of a hip hop or a rap song. And then that made it in as like a training montage. Did you then go back and fine tune things so that it really fit that song and the beats were hitting where they're supposed to hit?
Yes and no. Sometimes I was afforded that, but there were other times where, I mean, it was like down to the wire and we wanted to replace with something else. And you just had to like throw it on. I mean, I think him and Bobby, even at some point when I was working on notes over here, he and Bobby would go and tempt to picture in another room, and our music editor would temp with just different tracks and pick something and then throw it to me and I'd plop it in. And it's like, and then they'd end up kind of editing it on stage. So it was like run and gun a lot of times when it came to music because we were auditioning so many different things that there wasn't a lot of time to kind of choose when it would come in and go out or a little like that. So a lot of quick and dirty, but I mean, people were really fast and Justin has just like this ever-running catalog of music in his head. So it was kind of easy to pull from at a moment's notice and drop something on. And I think what is really cool and kind of validating is when, I do cut something together and they are able to throw kind of any song on there and it works like without having to adjust anything. That always feels really good and at least rhythmically that it's natural and will feel good to the audience hopefully. So yeah, there's a lot of hustling at the end.
Yeah, I like that image you described of like you're in one room cutting something, there's like sound happening in another room. And
Mhm.
then when you and Justin were having conversations about it and the editing style, were you guys referencing other films or other shows you guys have worked on? Or was it more just like, oh, here's the tone and the pace I want for this, or here's what I'm trying to say?
Nothing we worked on. I mean, I think he had some lines in there from his first feature kicks, but nothing that we worked on together. But there was, I mean, Jodorowsky's Holy Mountain was a major reference for a lot of the things in this film, visually, conceptually, even tonally. It's like, I mean, there's so much to pull from, obviously, in that film, but yeah, it's just so rich in ideas that we were able to kind of use that one reference for a lot of things we tried and things we experimented with. And then Gaspar Noé's everything pretty much, like mostly his Enter the Void, but a lot of the color and kind of acid trip moments were, yeah, they were pulled and inspired by his work. And I'm sorry, were you asking about you weren't asking about music just then, you were asking about just in general.
Just in general, your editing style and
Got
yeah,
it.
how to, yeah. So how to structure scenes.
Editing style, like I said this the other day that I think we balance each other out really well. I typically I'm very quiet and I really like a measured editor and don't like for the edits to be visible, too visible. And this film, just the nature of this film, much like the sport, really requires you to be loud and bombastic and very visible. So I had to, it was scary for me at first for sure, and I had to kind of abandon the instinct to pull back and breathe and really just go for it, like cut away. And once we did, I think I don't know, it made room for a lot of different kinds of tones and structures that, JT wanted to try to reflect a lot of the contradiction within the sport itself. Like the execution became kind of the commentary about the sport, which is so hidden. Like no one's really going to pick up on that. But the tonal shifts, there's a lot of sharp tonal shifts that kind of serve as like commentary for the contrast in the sport and the contradiction of spectacle and pain or spectacle and the real truth of the sport. And so we kind of used editing to do some of that work, if that makes sense.
Speaking of the quote unquote real truth, I think the story cultivates an intentional confusion around which scenes might be hallucination and which ones are reality. And I'm curious whether that was an aspect of your editing as well. In other words, did you know that this scene was supposed to be a hallucination then edited differently? Or is that also part of the blurring that you're just keeping that in mind in the edit room?
It evolved naturally. It's literally case by case when we try something and it was like, oh, we're not sure if this is real. Our hypothetical audience is not sure this is real. Is that good? Does that serve us? Does that confuse us? Do we want that confusion? Like, what are we trying to say with this happy accident or something, And it was really kind of just trying to, what's the word I'm looking for? Evaluate at every step what this was doing. I mean, really, we discovered that the is he there or is this real or not served the kind of story we were trying to tell. And I think the reality playing with that was part of that evaluation. And the moments that were supposed to feel confusing, you didn't really know what was real, if Cam was actually experiencing it, were meant to kind of reflect his possible, condition, the consequences or the effects of the head hit that he got. And is he a reliable narrator this whole time? Or is the skull starting to open up a little too much and we really have no idea where we are, where the ground is, and is that true to kind of a player's experience? It asks some of those questions that I think were interested in exploring in the cutting room. And so, yeah, we played with it as we went.
And I saw the doctor's injection of him also of like sort of shattering my sense of reality. It's like I didn't exactly know what he was being injected with. I didn't know what effects it was having on him. So again, there are these great scenes of impact there. You use that X-ray. It was like almost like an X-ray projected onto the characters. So that sort of jolted me one way, and then he's getting injected. So it's a whole world of like, I don't know how much I trust him. So
Yeah.
what's happening to him? Were those X-ray? Yeah, how did you edit those X-ray moments? Was that something you were doing in the editing room, or did you have to send it off to a VFX team and it came back to you? Or
Oh no, it was definitely VFX. We talked about it conceptually in the room and they gave us something back, like it just kind of a previs that I could slot in at any point in time, just to because we really wanted to anchor the audience and kind of help them track Cam's descent and his like de-evolution and both mentally and physically. And I think the discussion around the skull was a big one, using that as like a device to help us do that, which really wasn't added until close to the end, like close to, after watching it and then figuring out that I think we needed some more guidance with where we were emotionally. And so, yeah, I think, I don't know, we might have been on the mix stage or no, it might have been a little earlier before that. But yeah, anyway, there was a point where Justin's like, okay, what if we threw in the melting skeleton, I think we called Gary, like before these moments, and then, added this 3D skull to really hit people over the head with the fact that this guy is not doing well, whether they take it literally or not. And so, yeah, we just kind of added those bells and whistles for guidance.
Another technique you used that I am curious at what point this was developed, and that's the helmet POV footage you do, where there's a long segment in the middle where we're basically locked inside the helmet with our main character. And so obviously they filmed that in a certain way. What did they bring to you, or was that also something that sort of developed more explicitly in the edit room?
That was thought about beforehand, and I think they call it a doggy cam. I'm not sure why. I mean, I guess it looks like it's tied to a doggy who's running around. I don't know. Anyway, I mean, it was really all about immersion. That the idea for that, and really trying to get as close to the chaos and throw the audience into the chaos. So instead of kind of watching football, they are inside it, or as close to inside it as they possibly can, and really getting to experience the confusion and cacophony of it all, and the brutality and the blindness, something that players find to be routine, but I think most audiences are extremely disoriented by and hopefully a little terrified by. And yeah, I'm really kind of putting in perspective the fact that sitting on bleachers, this sport looks like it looks heroic and almost polished sometimes. But for players, it's really claustrophobic and unnerving and brutal when they put the strap on. So yeah, I think it's reminding people that their Sunday entertainment is a lot scarier and a lot more risky.
Did you research this aspect of football? Like, did you stop and say, like, I'm going to watch broadcasts or go to games or try to talk to players?
No, my dad uh, played in the league, and he played for the Raiders. He won a Super Bowl with them in '81. So football's been a part of my life the whole time, and just kind of just this hum. I fell asleep to many a football game, not because I don't like the sport, but it was just always on, and I was just yeah, I fall asleep faster. But so yeah, I mean, I think honestly that's what excited me about the film and getting to explore some of those things, watching my dad kind of lick his wounds. He had about 7 knee surgeries while he was playing. And yeah, watching him kind of hurt and be in pain physically, but also soak up the kind of adoration that he would receive when he walked out and he had his ring on, and everyone would be like, "Oh, hi, Mr. Mason," And as a kid, I was just beaming like, "Oh, my dad's my hero." And so I had a very close or interesting relationship with the sport. Um, and I think that kind of contributed to at least some of the performances that I was looking for throughout this. Trying to make it as authentic as, my experience was watching him grow up.
Oh, that's really interesting. Did you show this to your dad, the finished film? Has he seen it and talked to you about
No,
it?
unfortunately, he's seeing it from above. He passed away
Uh,
in 2008 from heart disease. So, kind of dealing with the consequences of the sport was also close to my heart, and wanting to just, I don't know, talk about it, grieve about it, just wanting, but I think he'd be proud. I think he was gregarious and loud and funny and absurd, and I think he would love this movie for that reason. It's all those things, and so hopefully I made him proud.
it's amazing that you were able to bring that personal connection to the story as an editor. That's really interesting.
Yeah, thanks.
So, Taylor, when you talk about the absurdity and the craziness and all these various tones, that leads me right into asking you about this final scene, which is better lit than I think I've seen a horror movie since I can recall. And I just, obviously, we're getting into spoiler territory. People were warned in advance. But Taylor, talk to me about at what point was it decided this is what we're going to do? And how did this come together in the edit room?
There was a lot of discussion about the tone, which flavor of tone we were going to land on, and really what the audience would be looking for at this moment in the film. And I think we landed on catharsis and, this idea that you're laughing to keep from crying. And how do we even top this huge, I don't know, bloody murder of Isaiah? Where do you go from there? And it's like, a mass slaughter of pig-faced like owners. And in a way that we're not taking it too seriously. I think this also pulls from Jodorowsky, who, in all the social commentary that he has in his film, he captures it in an absurd way. And that's kind of what we wanted to emulate here and let the audience kind of leave with the character accomplishing what he wants, but the audience getting to smile at the end of it, even though it's like a bloodied massacre. And I had a lot of fun cutting this. We had some great performances, some great improv. It was really hard to pick and choose some of these, especially from, Julia and Tom in the film, and or well, Tim, I guess you can say. And yeah, I mean, it's just kind of the only way to go out after everything that we've done, every tone that we've touched on in the film. This is the one that felt like it was a way to kind of lift everyone's spirits, ironically, because it is so brutal and gory.
And in a scene like that, it's a big set piece. It's all in this like one location. As Skid mentioned, it's very bright. But like, how many cameras are rolling? How much footage do you have? How many choices do you get to make there to sort of create the tone and the feel of that last scene?
It was 2 days shot, and we had three cameras. And then I mean, they did it piecemeal because it was so involved, obviously, but we had three cameras. There were a lot of stipulations, though, like we couldn't get the field bloody. There's certain backgrounds that we couldn't shoot. And so they had, they were limited in terms of what they could cover. So we had to get creative, which honestly was really fun for me, just trying to find ways um, around certain things and still make it feel violent and bloody and fun. And so, and I think the tone of the scene allows, like, it gives us a lot of latitude to not be super finessed or polished. There's some cartoon-like moves in there that I think is allowed just because it's insane already. We've established that. And yeah, I think it was done really, I think it was done in a week. We cut that scene, which is ambitious, but I mean, we did it, and I think it's one of my favorite scenes in the film. So, maybe pressure makes diamonds. I don't know.
Mhm.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting that the advertising campaign, like the big billboards I see around LA, they chose a shot of the main character from that sequence, which I don't often see in a horror movie, but it's very effective, and
Yeah.
I think it does speak to sort of like how you chose to portray imagery in that sequence.
I mean, marketing knows what they're doing. I'll tell you that much. Brilliant.
Now, in the marketing materials, Cam is holding a football in each hand, but in the actual scene, he's working with one arm. And so that
Right.
actual shot is not from the sequence, but is
Right.
inspired by the sequence and telegraphs that we're going to get somewhere like this sooner or later in the marketing.
Yeah.
It's an interesting choice on their part.
Yeah. I'm a fan. Yeah. I love that shot. It's a great one, but we didn't keep it in for narrative reasons. So I'm still glad they were able to use it, repurpose it.
So Taylor, you've shared some about the sort of the process on that. Any other final thoughts on this project for you?
I'm just so happy that I mean, I still feel like a kid in a candy store. This being like my first studio, it's extremely robust. It's literally, I mean, it fits almost every movie under the sun and into one film. And just having the support of Universal and Monkeypaw to help guide us, and while also allowing Justin to like realize his vision. And I don't know. I'm excited to see how it ages, and I'm excited to see what people glean from it over time. I think there's going to be some closer second watches, some Easter eggs that people glean that they weren't able to really appreciate the first go around. And I'm looking forward to kind of, seeing what this gives people, I guess, or how it inspires people over time. I'm just going to put that out there into the universe. But yeah, very thankful, and I can't wait to do it again.
Well, what's next for you?
I mean, right now I'm reading scripts And there's some great scripts out there. Like I'm very optimistic about the industry because of this. And there's some really cool original work being greenlit. And so yeah, hopefully I'll find something that it's a good fit soon and I'll be shouting about it from the rooftops.
Well, plan to come back here and shout about it with us on Below the Line. We're going to call it a wrap. And Taylor, this was a lot of fun. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Awesome. I'll be back in a heartbeat.
That's so great to hear. Thank you for sharing all of these interesting tidbits from behind the scenes. It's really helpful to hear.
Of course, my pleasure.
Listeners, I always appreciate your feedback. My email address is skid@belowtheline1word.biz. That's B-I-Z. The release schedule for this season is still evolving, and there will be some gap weeks. But if you're missing your Below the Line fix, there are more than 270 in the archive. You can listen to past episodes at our website, belowtheline.biz, or wherever you get your podcasts. Closing credits, thanks to Curtis Five for our music, John Wan for our logo, and to all of our listeners, I appreciate you. If you want to support us, consider a purchase. The logo is available on t-shirts, mugs, and stickers at redbubble.com. Other ways you can help: first, give us a positive rating wherever you get your podcasts. Second, tell your friends about an episode you enjoyed, because that's how we gain new listeners. All of that aside, whatever your engagement, the fact that you're still listening means a lot to me. Thanks again from Below the Line.